Welcome to Spooky Hours. My name's David Saunderson. Today we're talking to author, researcher, and filmmaker Mike Ricksecker, who's the author of a best-selling book, A Walk in the Shadows, a complete guide to the shadow people, and he's appeared on several TV shows, including The Alaska Triangle and Ancient Aliens. We're excited to talk to Mike today. I've got my colleague Anne Massey, who is the deputy editor of Spooky Owls and the island editor of Spooky Owls. We're going to be talking to Mike about his books and about his upcoming tour. He's coming to Ireland. He's going to be looking and showing people around some of the ancient monuments, some of the ghosts and hauntings of the Emerald Isle, and we're excited to talk to him. So coming up, Mike Ricksecker. Hi, and we're back. Hi, Anne, how are you?
I'm good, David. How are you today?
Yeah, good, thank you. I just said we're back, but I was only away for a few seconds. It's exciting to hear we're doing our first trans Irish Sea discussion here. We're going to be talking to Mike about his about some of his adventures. What is it you're going to be wanting to talk to Mike about today, Anne?
Well, Mike is very much a walking encyclopedia on a lot of areas. He is very known for his work in the paranormal field, and some of his areas of speciality range from the ancient pyramids and the secrets associated with those, right down to a phenomenon known as the Alaska Triangle, and particularly shadow people, which is the subject of his one of his latest books, which we're very keen to talk more about. And of course, he's coming to Ireland in July as part of a Mysterious Adventures tour. And he's going to be bringing that knowledge with him and exploring Ireland and some of the more ancient areas of Ireland and the more supernatural parts to bring his expertise and to see how it relates to what he finds on his travels.
Yeah. And I believe he was also on US television on Friday night on Ancient Aliens, as you say. So that's quite exciting. That's a big TV show, which I know popular amongst a lot of our readers and viewers. So we'll be talking to him about that. So let's invite Mike on. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, David and Ann. How are you guys doing?
We're going well. Now you're just going to have to excuse me for a bit. I'm still using this new system we're using. We're getting a lot fancier on the Spooky Owls, so if it looks a bit strange on the screen, you just bear with us. So Anne, what do you want to ask Mike first?
Well, you have such a wide range of expertise, shall we say. Particularly, you delve very in depth into shadow people, which we'll be covering shortly. You also are known for your expertise on the Alaska Triangle and on the ancient pyramids. I'm actually just realizing there's a kind of triangular link there as well. What would you say is your most interesting area that you specialize in, and what drew you to that?
Oh, that's a great question. Because I I kind of consider myself a jack of all trades. I dabble in a lot of different areas, kind of like you just described. And what's fascinating to me is how all these things are connected, which is why I developed an online site called the Connected Universe Portal, which is an online learning platform, and learning about all of these different topics and how they are interconnected. Us to shadows, us to these ancient sites of power, us to the rest of the universe. So, to me, that is fascinating. Trying to discover these connections and how they're related to the universe and other planes of existence.
Yeah, we're talking really layers on layers of history versus geography. And as you said, there are so many different connections, and you and I have related to those before. But let's break it down a little bit for our viewers today. We're talking about something called the Alaska Triangle, which not everyone has necessarily heard of. So would you explain a bit more about it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. The Alaska Triangle is, kind of like what it sounds like, a Bermuda Triangle that's in Alaska. In fact, some people refer to it as Alaska's Bermuda Triangle, which is kind of funny. But there are these triangle areas all over the world. Bermuda's the most famous, of course, but there's the Dragon Triangle off the coast of Japan, which they've reported all kinds of strange phenomena out there for thousands of years, and it gets passed down into legend and lore. But yeah, Alaska has this phenomena as well. And it's a really large area, extends from Juneau to Anchorage up to Reykjavik and then back down. And it's triangle's kind of a misnomer. People want all the strange activity to happen, like specifically in that region, but really it's us kind of being cute about it, coming up with some terminology and picking three different points, major points that would encompass the area, but it really does extend out. It's more, it's really almost more circular in nature rather than a triangle, which makes a lot of sense considering the way uh, energy works on this earth. And when we find those different kind of nodes of power, it is this kind of circular energy that's welling up from the earth's core and generating this phenomena.
It's this particular area, as we know, like you said, Bermuda is obviously the most well-known one, but it never, or certainly I'd never come across it really. I think it was it Art Bell back in end of the 90s, early 2000s, kind of brought it to the forefront. And before that, was it early 70s? Was there some thinking now, the was it like a congressman or something that went missing, and that's what kind of brought it to the public eye?
Yeah, that's the Art Bell did a phenomenal job of bringing a lot of the information to the masses. And yeah, it was in 1973. Congressman Nick Begich and Speaker of the House Hale Boggs went missing up there, along with their pilot and one of their aides. And they've never found any wreckage, nothing. They just completely disappeared. And there was a massive search and rescue effort that was put forth to try to find them. And in almost 50 years now, nothing's ever been found. And that's not the only case of that happening up there. In 1950, there was a Douglas Skymaster airplane from the Air Force carrying 44 people that just went completely missing. And they had, again, thousands of people out there looking for this missing airplane with these people. And again, nothing's ever been found. But yeah, the Boggs Begich plane is the one that really put everything on the map.
What do you think? Obviously, with anything like this, there's a number of anomalies and circumstances. But what do you think, apart from the obvious vastness and inaccessible areas of Alaska, what do you think is the cause of all these missing people and modes of transport?
Yeah, and you did bring something up there that Alaska is very vast and large. So several of these disappearances are people sure getting lost in the woods. Maybe they were hiking and a bear or a moose got them. That it happens. But 16,000 people have gone missing in Alaska since 1988, which is a large number, especially for a state that's so sparsely populated. And while sure some of them are, you could explain them away as getting lost in the woods or what have you, several of these people you just really don't have an explanation for. Seward, Alaska is was it 2010 or 2011, something like that, and it was a marathon that they were doing. They call it Mount Marathon. You go up and down the mountain, and one of the runners just completely disappeared into thin air. He went up the mountain, never came back down. Again, a large search and rescue. So the question is, where do these people go? What happens to them? And I believe in many of these cases, there's, that activity from the triangle is coming into play. That vortex energy is welling up, creating these portals. A lot of different supernatural activity happens up there. It's just a really phenomenal area to investigate, explore. And when you're there, because I spent 3 years there during the mid 90s when I was part of the US Air Force, it's just there's a different feel up there. It's a very volatile area. There's earthquakes, volcanoes. I mean, when I landed on the ground, 1992, stepped off the airplane, there was still kind of ash falling from the sky from a recent volcano eruption. So you have all this bizarre activity up there. Plus, the Earth's magnetic shield up there is a little bit thinner, which is why we get a lot of the auroras and things like that up there. So yeah, I think a lot of these different disappearances, like the Douglas Sky Master that I mentioned, there's a theory out there that this disappeared into some sort of portal, and we've seen things like that in the Bermuda Triangle. Bruce Gurdon tells a fascinating story how he actually survived going through one of these things. Came out on the other side. There was a bit of a time slip, but or time displacement, but he survived that. But if these things disappeared into a portal in maybe appeared in another place in time, say 500 years ago, are these some of the Thunderbird reportings that the ancient Native Alaskans have passed down in their legends? It's possible.
That's mad, isn't it? Because we've actually been looking at time slips on Spooky Isles as well. So that really, it just throws out more questions than answers, doesn't it? And I suppose that's one of the reasons why you keep going. We all want that grain to answer some of those questions. So moving on from that to another area that you like to specialize in, and I know it's something you've done as part of the podcast Edge of the Rabbit Hole, in regards to some of the mysteries of the ancient pyramids, which we equally, although we've had a lot of questions answered over the years, and I suppose more supposition, I'd say, we don't ever really know for sure. But is it similar reasoning why you're so taken with Egypt and the ancient pyramids, because there are so many questions there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you go out to Egypt and you explore, and kind of like you were saying earlier, there's more questions that come out of that than answers. But it gives you a richer and fuller idea of what may have happened, long, long time ago. Now, a lot of different theories as to what the pyramids may have been. They were not tombs; no bodies were ever found there, and I've found several different things fascinating about the Great Pyramid. For one, there's been some research done in the past about the attunement of the pyramid to the key of F sharp. Tom Danley, sound engineer, did some work on that years ago, and you read a paper on it, and it's like, okay, that's interesting, or maybe it's noted in a book somewhere, and you kind of take it with a grain of salt. But we actually did experiments in the Great Pyramid, and sure enough, that thing is tuned to F sharp. And what's great about that is the Earth is actually also tuned to F sharp. So they built this thing to be in tune with the Earth, which is absolutely amazing. And you look at other aspects of the Great Pyramid, like in the Queen's Chamber, there's a niche in the one wall with kind of a hole that goes back off into the pyramid somewhere. And mainstream archaeologists have looked at that and said, well, we don't really know what it is, but we believe maybe there was an idol or a statue here that had been placed. And then you look at the back of the wall that's there within the niche, and there are scorch marks on it, and the stone there is vitrified. It's been melted. So it's like, no, there wasn't just a statue that was sitting here. There's something extremely hot burning here. So when you see theories like Christopher Dunn's theory about the pyramids being power plants, it really gives a lot more credence to these types of ideas. And so that's just one example of so many different mysteries there in Egypt.
I was just going to ask the question though, and I hope I don't jump in and go too quickly to the Irish question. Obviously, there is obviously lots of monuments within the UK and Ireland that I think they are just as interesting, if not more interesting, than the Egyptian pyramids. Do you, and obviously more about the Irish stuff. What is there any connection there? Do we have parts of the world that have these monuments that are doing strange and wonderful things?
Yeah, it's interesting. You do actually see connections between Ireland and Egypt, and I did a class on that for our Connected Universe portal there back in, I think it was December. and it's an area I've really just started to do more research on since we're going to Ireland. And I'd heard stories about these connections between Egypt and Ireland. It's like I want to learn more about that, and it's really really interesting how you see. These different legends and stories, but then there's actually some evidence that there was certainly a connection between Egypt and Ireland. And that's something I just find fascinating, really with the entire universe, that you are finding these connections from one location to another that for years and years and years our mainstream archaeology and history were telling us no, these were separate cultures that had no connection with each other until modern times. And yet you keep digging and digging and digging, and you're seeing these new excavations come out. They're like, oh, actually there was a connection here, and oh, this is actually older than we originally thought. So what we've been taught for years is very, very different than what really happened. And to me, that's a fascinating part about all this, is digging into the mystery and finding out what really happened, what is our lost history, and what have we forgotten over all the millennia.
And are there any particular places that Mike will be visiting that you think will prove some of the things that he's just been saying?
Well, one of them is actually, I think you put it on your wish list, didn't you, Mike? Drumbeg Stone Circle,
Yeah.
down in County Cork, which, these kind of things predate the likes of Stonehenge and what have you. And they're very much, and what makes Drumbeg Stone Circle unique compared to a lot of other places in Ireland is it's so mathematically precise. And I think that's what, Mike, you're touching on there, is the fact, obviously education has been shared across the world, and thousands of years ago everywhere was a bit closer together. So do you believe that those techniques, that education with the maths and astronomy, has obviously been handed over and shared, not just obviously through Egypt but across Europe and as far as Britain and Ireland?
Oh, absolutely. Drawback is definitely one of those locations I want to get to, and we're going to this July. We're hitting a lot of the different castles and what have you during our tour, which is fascinating. But Drawback is definitely a place that I want to get to. And in the research that I've been doing, you see that these stone circles there in Ireland, like Drawback, or like Stonehenge, which is kind of the one everybody points to, uh, there in the UK. You see these connections actually back to ancient Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, and that's where Göbekli Tepe is, which has all these stone circles within it. They've only uncovered like 5% of that site, which is fascinating because it already looks huge and massive from what they've uncovered. So you see this tradition of these stone circles that's been passed down, passed down, passed down, and with Drombeg, it's astronomically aligned to the winter solstice, and you see that with a lot of these different stone circles and monuments all over the world, as they had these fascinating astronomical alignments.
Why do you, how did they do it? How did they do I mean, there's probably, you hear this on a lot of TV shows, but I'll get it out of your mouth. How did it happen? How did they get the skills to be able to do something so mathematical that, we'd be lucky to do it ourselves with with computers and things like that. And they would be able to do it with some, string and some stone weights.
Yeah, that's the big mystery. We do not know how they did this, because even today there are things that we cannot do that they did. We're just they're now getting the technology and equipment to be able to lift some of these items and to be able to align some of these things, and some things we still can't do. So that's the big mystery. How did they do that? And you look at some of these locations like Drombeg and others where there's mathematics built into it that like the Pythagorean theorem. You see this in a lot of our ancient architecture, but it wasn't accredited till it was accredited to Pythagoras centuries and centuries later, or even millennia later. It's like they had this knowledge far, far back in the past. We just again, that's the big mystery. We don't know exactly how they built it. Was it knowledge that was handed down through the years that and I think that's why we're doing things like a lot of our major exploration in Antarctica, to go to a completely different part of the globe. It's a vast untapped area. There are mysteries hidden under that ice, and um, you know when they dig down into their drill down into that, they're finding that there was a jungle landscape back then. Well, if there was human life that was there on that island when it was still a jungle, what kind of ancient technology did they have? What kind of knowledge did they have? Did they have the knowledge to build the pyramids to get it passed down from them? And I think they're looking for things like, anti-gravity technology. You look at Coral Castle in Florida, Edward Lee Scanlon, who said that he had, discovered the mystery of the ancients to be able to build that structure there in the early 20th century. And that knowledge went to his grave, and it had something to do with magnetics, apparently. So is this what they're trying to find down there in Antarctica? That because I believe again everything's connected. Uh, these pyramids and these different ancient sites of power. I believe that knowledge was passed down uh, generation to generation from culture to culture. Maybe even dating back into the Atlanteans that began with the Atlantean culture, and over time, as different catastrophes and cataclysms had happened, different wars, genocide, things like that, did it just get lost to time?
What do you think, Anne?
I just the whole thing blows my mind because seeing the connections and realizing we spend in today's society, and by today I mean the last few centuries, we've spent so long segregating ourselves. I think that's half the reason why a lot of the answers have been lost. If we'd actually kept those connections that were there, we'd probably be a lot further along in our research. But that's not the only thing that has us asking questions. The other one, which is a big field of yours, I know, Mike, is shadow people. So I think to start with that, we need to ask, what is a shadow person?
How many hours do you have? Yeah, because that's I get that question a lot. Okay, what is a shadow person? And it's actually not a easy question to answer. It's not just a black and white. Okay, here's what a definition of a shadow person is, because that could be so many different things, and they show up in a lot of different visages. So you have the humanoid figure. Just it looks like a person. It's black in form. You don't see any eyes. You don't see any features. Well, I'll take that back. You may get red eyes or some different colored eyes, but generally you don't. There's no nose, no mouth, nothing, no real discernible features. It could be solid looking in nature. It could be transparent. Sometimes they're wearing the hats, what people refer to as the hat man. There's the crawler, this thing that crawls up the walls and ceilings. Sometimes they show up as a vaporous form, a mist, a wisp, a hooded figure. So all these different forms, but coming across shadowy in nature, and they each seem to have their own different agendas. So, some are, of course, more nefarious in nature. Those are the ones that people, point to, get scared about. Some people say they're demonic or what have you. But then there are others that are rather benevolent and actually try to help people. Most are just rather benign, and they kind of stand and stare and watch and observe, which might be creepy, but it's not necessarily nefarious. So and you're kind of, cracking open a big barrel of worms or what have you when you kind of dive into the realm of shadows.
So
How do
would
you,
you say, sorry, David, go on.
I was going to say, how is that different to ghosts? Because you've described what
That
we
was
would
what I was
expect of
just going to
ghosts.
ask.
There you go. See, we're
Yeah.
thinking the same.
Yeah, well, and shadow entities could be human spirits. They could be human spirits. They could be extraterrestrials. They could be interdimensional beings. They could be a lot of different things, and some of them are actually human spirits that can't fully manifest as an apparition and come off as a shadow. In fact, there were several of us one time a couple years ago that saw a a black shadowy smoke morph into the apparition of a little girl. So is here's one and the same thing. It is a shadow and a ghost at the same time. And watching that transition was fascinating. So it's, when we say ghost or apparition versus shadow, it's really the appearance. Like I just had somebody message me earlier this morning saying, "Well, can a shadow person be white?" And it's like, well, we wouldn't call it a shadow then we would call it an apparition. So it's just terminology.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that so often they are described as being seen in peripheral vision?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It really has to do with the physiology of our eyes. Our eyes are made up of rods and cones, and the cones, which are more in the center of the eye near the optic nerve, those give us definition and color. They're kind of like the high def camera of our eyes, where the rods, which are on more toward the sides, those are light receptors. They bring in different spectrums of light into our eyes that we don't normally see straight on. And so, like stargazers will use um, what they call averted vision. It's a technique that they will use to see celestial objects like comets or other things. And I haven't done it myself, even though I really like astronomy. I'll just use a telescope. But apparently, they have a technique where they will kind of like see out the side a little bit to view some of these celestial objects better than straight on. And so, this is what's happening when we see a shadow out of the corner of our eye. We're seeing into a little bit of a different light spectrum from the periphery. And we're like, oh, something's there. We turn and look. And it appears like it just vanished, but it didn't really vanish. It's actually still there, just in a different light spectrum.
David, what's your take on that?
It's all a bit creepy. I'm trying to take it in because it's a different take on what we talk about when we talk about apparitions and spirits here on the Spooky Owls. How prevalent are shadow people? How many are there? How often does it happen?
Yeah. To me, they're pretty prevalent, but it's like most other things. Some locations are going to have more activity than others. Some people are more prone to seeing certain types of entities, and I think it has to do with personal resonance. So I'm one that sees more shadows and apparitions. Others sees more apparitions and shadows, and that has to do with the fact that we each have our own personal resonance and vibration. The human body resonates within a certain range of frequencies up and down a scale. And so, these entities that we're observing are also the same in that regard, where they're resonating between a certain frequency. And so, my body has become more accustomed and in tune to seeing these shadows. I'm resonating at a certain frequency; they're on a certain frequency. We kind of connect at that level. And that doesn't mean I don't ever see apparitions. I do at times, but it's more shadows than the apparitions. And some people are just attuned where they're not really seeing much of anything. They kind of fall in the middle there somewhere. What exactly those numbers would be, I would love to try to figure that
Can you
out.
give us an example of an experience you've had with a shadow person? Maybe sometime you've seen someone or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of different experiences. The first one that I had, which was actually a physical experience, I was about 8 years old, woke up in the middle of the night, and there was this tall, dark figure standing in the corner of my room. Had no idea about shadow people or shadow beings or anything like that at the time. I just thought there was an intruder in the house and he was about to kill me, because that's about what you think at 8 years old. And I'd seen enough movies where I'm like, I have about enough time to gasp and I'm a goner. Fortunately, I'm still allowed to tell the tale, which is great. But like I said, it did get physical with me. It approached my bed, leaned over. I'm staring up into this blank black face. There's no eyes, no nose, no mouth, nothing to look at. I'm trying to scream. My mouth opens up. Nothing comes out because I'm just too terrified. And it actually grabbed me by the wrists, crossed my arms across my body, and then ran off down the hall, and of all places, into a closet. At that point, I found my voice, found my legs, ran off into my parents' bedroom screaming about what had just happened. And they're, very nice parents trying to console me, tell me that I just had a bad dream, but I'd been awake for this whole thing. So that was my first major experience.
Okay. And have you ever experienced anything like that?
I've seen peripheral vision and shadows, but to me, I suppose I just view them as entities the same I would with any paranormal experience.
Yeah.
And you do, like you just said, you knew you were awake, but a lot of the research with regards to shadow people, and I think you've touched on it yourself in your book and everything, is the fact that it does have links to sleep paralysis. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sleep paralysis. Now, with that incident, I didn't have the sleep paralysis. You know, my mouth was opening, my arms are crossing. I could turn my head and watch the thing run down the hall. But yeah, I actually think that there are two different phenomena that happen to occur at the same time. I've experienced real sleep paralysis, just in a little bit of a different way, where um, and it can happen this way, where your body is so exhausted it just falls asleep on you, but your mind is still awake. And that's happened to me a couple of times, which is very disconcerting, especially since both times I was in a work environment. And the first one, I was in the military at the time, so you don't want to get caught sleeping on the job, even though it was like my mind's awake, my body is zonked. And it was really scary, you know, because I couldn't move, and you don't know how long this is going to be happening. What I figured out was, okay, let me try to wiggle a toe, and you know, so I wiggle a toe, and then okay, I got one going. Let's see if I can wiggle a couple, get the foot moving. Kind of worked my way up my body until I could finally wake up my mind. So it's a real phenomenon, and you know, people most times what happens is people wake up in the middle of the night and they're paralyzed and they can't move, and it's what's happening is the body naturally will paralyze you so you don't act out your dreams in your sleep. Very, very natural. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes is people wake up and that hasn't stopped happening yet. And people sometimes will even get like a partial sleep paralysis where like part of their body is still in that paralyzed state. And I have had that happen once before where I woke up and it wasn't the pins and needles arm fell asleep sort of thing. It was just dead. You know, I couldn't move at all. At least, you know, that part of my body. So, but people will report waking up, being paralyzed, and seeing the shadow entity, and they think that the shadow person is doing it to them. But I have a different take on that. And what um, our modern medical community has said about it is that these are, when we see the shadow when we wake up with the sleep paralysis, these are hallucinations from our dreams. We're still in a dream state and we're hallucinating, and that's what we see. Um, I have a problem with that statement because we dream about a lot of different things when we're asleep, not just people. So if it's a hallucination, why do I not see, you know, cars and motorcycles in my bedroom? Why do I not see airplanes going overhead or trees and bushes? You know, it's always, you know, a person. So I don't think it's a hallucination. The other part of that is okay. So if it's not a hallucination, then what is happening? Um, and I think maybe a lot of people who are parents can relate to this, where you know you have a child come into the room, and you know you know, they need to use the restroom, they want to drink a water, something like that. They had a bad dream, and a lot of times they'll tap you on the shoulder and wake you up, and you go off and you take care of them. But sometimes, and my youngest son Cameron was notorious for this, he would just stand there and stare. And he wouldn't tap you on the shoulder. He'd just stare at you. And all of a sudden you wake up, oh my God, Cameron,
Yeah.
yeah, what are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, it spooks you for a second. Whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, I had a bad dream. He, you know, used the bathroom, whatever. And so we go take care of it. But what was it that woke me up if you didn't tap me? If you didn't shake me awake? Well, I felt his presence. We each have a toroidal field of energy that surrounds us. The Heart Math Institute's done a lot of great research on this. And that extends out several feet. And that's why when, you know, we might have our back to the door of a room and all of a sudden you kind of like somebody just walked into the room. You turn around, somebody's there. You didn't hear them. You felt somebody walk into the room. You feel somebody's presence. And so these beings have that as well. They have their own energy, which means they have their own energy field that is crossing into ours. And so what I think is happening is we're woken up because we feel the presence there in the room staring at us. We wake up and we see them. Sometimes we have that sleep paralysis going on. Other people reported not having sleep paralysis and have seen this thing like I have. Many others have not had the sleep paralysis while seeing shadow entities. And a lot of accounts are, you know, people are wide awake or we're on an investigation or something like that. But So what I think is happening is people are waking up, they have the sleep paralysis, they were woken up by feeling the presence of the entity. The entity's there, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, somebody's in the room. We don't immediately go to shadow person. We usually go to intruder. There's somebody in the house that's not supposed to be here. We get frightened. We can't move, and it's just kind of like tumbling down a rabbit hole. And by the time it's all said and done, and we realize this isn't a human being, this is something else, we've now attributed the whole sleep paralysis element to the entity when they're just two separate things happening at the same time.
An element of denial almost, that there's
Yeah.
something there because they don't want to explain it. That's interesting though, you're saying our awareness is like, you're aware that this entity's in your personal space kind of thing. Now, do you think, and as someone that's kind of gone to other countries to investigate, and including the US, and likewise when you've come over traveling, and hopefully when you're here in Ireland in July, do you think that natural thing that we have, this awareness, I suppose you could call it an almost a sixth sense of an awareness around you, do you think that's heightened when you go overseas and you're doing these investigations? Do you think because you're in an unfamiliar environment that perhaps your senses are more heightened, that fight or flight thing is more heightened, and do you think as a result of that you're more likely to have that paranormal experience?
That's a good question, because I think there's a few different factors that come into play here. For one, we're immediately excited. We're in a new place, we're in a new country, we're exploring someplace historic, so we kind of have that adrenaline going through us already anyway, because we're so excited to be there. But I think a lot of these locations, when we start talking about like the stone circles and pyramids and things like that, these were intentionally built on highly energetic areas of the world. They were trying to tap into that earth energy and use it for different purposes, whether it's, heightened states of consciousness, healing powers, maybe interdimensional travel, if they knew how to open up stargates and portals and things like that. So, they were already trying to utilize that type of energy. So when you walk into some of these places, you're feeling that energy. I know I surely felt it there in Egypt and the pyramids. And yeah, uh, I haven't really done a lot of stone circles yet. Changing that here soon. But people that I've talked to that have walked into those circles, they absolutely feel it. And tests and experiments have been done on some of them where they are finding a resonance there. They are finding that energy there. Some of the work that's been done at the Rollright stones, they have found that, circular type of vortex energy working within it. So it's absolutely fascinating. So I think that it's a number of different factors, between our own excitement and our adrenaline to the energy that's there. And then, the energy from people that's been expended there over the years. I think a lot of these locations are capturing energy from humans, and it's one of those, almost like the stone tape theory, where it gets recorded into the structure that's there and played back over years. These things are capturing energy not just from the earth but from us as well.
I'd agree with that actually, because even close to us is Loch Gur, which is way older than the likes of Stonehenge and Newgrange and everything else. And the one thing is, one of those places you go in, you just feel the weight of the millennia, and it's almost like having a prickly heat. You can feel it when you walk into the circle, and it just dissipates as soon as you come away from it. So yeah, I would totally buy into that theory for sure.
Now, Mike, you're coming to Ireland in July. You're bringing a group with you, and I think people can still book on that trip. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Ancient Mysteries of Ireland. You can find all the links and everything on my website, mikericksecker.com, but it's booked through Mysterious Adventures Tours. You can find the information on their website as well. And I believe we have 4 tickets available, July 1st through the 9th. And like we said, Drombeg is one of those locations we're going to. We're going to Charleville Castle, Blarney Castle,
Spike
oh,
Island.
where else? Yeah, Spike Island,
Yeah.
right? Lep Castle. Yeah, we're hitting a lot of different locations.
And you've actually been consultant on this, I believe, on some of these places.
Yeah, Spike Island is if you're ever talking about a place that seems a lifetime away from everywhere else, Spike Island is it.
Can you tell people what Spike Island is? Because I know what it is, but what do other people know what it is?
It's you'd call it Ireland's Alcatraz, but I think it's a lot worse than Alcatraz. It's an island that's full of despair. Most of the people on it were either going to die from hard labour within it or be deported, so they were never going to set foot on Irish soil again, because Spike Island is an island. And it started off as a monastery. It has those layers and layers of history and energy that we're talking about. It's seen some awful deaths, the worst of humanity, and it's certainly one of the most active and dark locations I've ever investigated.
Oh, that sounds a wonderful place to go, I suppose. But Mike, you're going to be doing some investigations when you're here?
Yeah, we have 3 investigations lined up. One of those, Spike Island, that's an overnight there. So we will, I guess we'll be bunking in the dormitories there. So that'll be fun. And also Charleville Castle and Lep Castle will be investigating.
Oh, okay. So you're going to some very, very big places. So that's going to be very
Mhm.
exciting. So you've spoken about these places. We haven't really done much talk about your investigations. You obviously have been doing this for a long time, on-site investigations.
Yeah, some involved some way, shape, or form for, I guess, the last 30 years. The first little investigation that I had, which I really didn't even understand that I was doing a paranormal investigation, I was about 15 years old, something like that. And it was actually really, really fascinating talking about, energy. My friend David and I were at our friend Lori's house. We're just, teenagers shooting the breeze and in her living room. And all of a sudden she says, I think my house is haunted. And David and I are immediately, very intrigued. Oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. And she's, it's a historic home that was in the downtown area of our little town. And she was talking about the old family cemetery that was in the backyard and different creepy things that happened around the house. But her main concern was her own bedroom, where she had this one wall in the room where every time she would tack something up on the wall, like posters and things like that, it would always fall down, whether it was an hour, a day, a week later. She couldn't keep anything tacked up on this wall. So she thought the wall in her room was haunted. So we're going to go up and we're going to investigate. Again, not really understanding that's what we were doing, but that's what we did.
Scooby-Doo.
So we go up. Yeah, exactly. We're Scooby doing it. So we go up there, taking a look at the room. She's telling us more stories. Take a look at the wall. And then all of a sudden, my friend David put his hand flat to the wall like that. And all of a sudden, he turned this bright, bright red and started sweating profusely. And I'm looking at David like, oh my gosh, what in the world is going on with my friend? Because I'd never seen anything like this before. And so he starts going like wall to wall in the house, seeing if there are like any other quote unquote hot spots like this. And that was the moment that I knew that I was going to be involved, with this field, not even knowing that it was a field, just this phenomenon. This is fascinating. I want to learn more about this. That was the moment. And I've been involved some way, shape, or form ever since.
And now you're about to do some investigations in Ireland, which will be a whole new experience. And do you have any other questions? We've don't have much more time with Mike, but is there anything else you want to ask him today?
I started on your book, and it's brilliant. There's a chapter I haven't got to yet, which I'm curious about. If you can just old hag syndrome. What is that?
Yeah, old hag syndrome. That's where that's really related to sleep paralysis. People report waking up not only feeling paralyzed, but also with this old hag type of visage or a ghoul or something of this nature sitting on their chest that's pressing them down into the bed. So what's fascinating about that is, cultures from all over the world have been reporting this phenomenon for millennia. Cultures that weren't supposed to have any connection to each other whatsoever, and they're all reporting the same thing. We actually talked a little bit about this on the Ancient Aliens episode the other night, where you have like the Karabasan from Turkey or the Pisadera from Brazil or these different other cultures, the Dukak in Ethiopia. It's all like the same thing. They give it a different name, a little bit of a different legend lore behind it, but it's this shadowy entity or the old woman or the ghoul or whatever it is, sitting on their chest and pressing down. So, and there are people that have reported this without the sleep paralysis as well, where they've actually woken up. Eric Gerard has a story in the book, A Walk in the Shadows, of where he woke up. He could see the shadowy form of the old hag. He was sitting on his chest, pressing down, but he could move. And he actually threw this thing off of him and they rolled off onto the floor together. So fascinating story.
Anyone that wants your book, it seems to be, as I'm going through it, it's a fascinating read, and certainly throws there's a funny pun coming, a lot of light into the shadow people.
Can you show
Well,
your
and
book,
that's
Mike? You want to show us your book? You've got a copy of your book there
Yeah.
yeah,
while we're talking about
absolutely.
it?
So, and that might not be too far from the truth, Anne, because some I do speculate on it here in A Walk in the Shadows. Some of these shadow entities could actually be light beings, and you just for example, you stare at a light bulb too long. I do not recommend doing that. But if
No.
you stare at a light bulb for too long, you no longer really see the light. You just see the silhouette of a light bulb. So,
Yeah,
in that
that's a good point.
in that silhouette seems dark. The newest book is, of course, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. So throw that one up there too.
What we'll do is we'll make sure we put the links in the description here on YouTube.
And I think Ancient Aliens and the Alaska Triangle, I'd say they're both on Discovery Plus as well, are they, Mike?
Ancient Aliens is on History Channel,
Yeah.
but yeah, the Alaska Triangle is on Discovery Plus and Travel Channel.
So we'll all be able to get that as well. Brilliant.
Well, that's good. I'm sure we could keep asking you. So I'm not going to let you ask another question, Anne, because I'm sure this is going to we're going to go for hours and hours and hours. Thank you, Mike. It's been a really eye-opening, and as Anne said, throw a bit of light on shadows. I'll use that joke now as well. So thank you very much. It's been really great, and we look forward to hearing about how you go in Ireland. Maybe Anne will catch up with you while you're there. And if people are interested in going ghost hunting with you, which would be a very, very cool thing to do, they'll be able to see that, and we'll put the links on our site as well. So thank you very much, Mike, and thank you, Anne.
Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Speak soon.
Bye.